Welcome to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Ramosi Thurlow scale,
or MOTS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animals. We are, The Lost Signals is once again reviewing film and television for the holiday season. We have previously done Die Hard, which is the greatest Christmas movie of all time. But I think there is an argument to be made that tonight's movie is also a Christmas film.
HBO Max says it was.
Yeah. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, and I've always been too old for this shit. Here with Scott Thurlow.
And I'm almost too old for this shit, but not yet.
Chris Morgan.
I am the oldest for this bullshit.
And Stephen Ramosi.
and I wish I could have seen this in theaters, but I was too young for this shit.
Hey.
I did see this in theaters, hence I'm way too old for
So you were just old enough for this shit.
I was just sorry. You're right, Scott. I was just old enough for this shit.
And today we are doing Lethal Weapon, shock with all of that conversation. Anyway, Scott, you have a funny logline for us?
In the heat of the Lethal Weapon is what I'm going to go with.
All right. Steve-O, tell us about the plot of this movie.
Sure. A sex worker throws herself off of a balcony. Turns out it's like one of Danny Glover's old Vietnam buddy's daughter. They look into it. Turns out there's a conspiracy. They take down the conspiracy. End of movie. I mean, that's pretty much it, right? Like, there's not a ton that goes in this plot. It's really well done in the details, I think. But it's pretty straightforward, which I think helps it actually quite a bit. I could be easily convinced to give this a 3 if anybody's going to give it a 3. But I'm going to start off with a very strong 2. What really makes this movie sing is the character work and the I guess this is like one of the first like buddy cop movies, and watching this again, I know why buddy cop movies are still to this day so popular, because this one was really good and did it and made the kind of set the tone for ones that were to come. So the plot good, pretty strong. I'm gonna give it a 2, maybe convinced of a 3, but that's not where the real strength lies.
I agree, but I wanted to bring this up since you brought it up. We'll talk about it here. I did a little bit of research into the history of buddy cop films. So what's considered the prototype was a Kurosawa film, which unfortunately I'm forgetting. I forgot to write it down. I intended to.
It's a very simple title.
Yeah. Too. But then you have In the Heat of the Night, which is I don't consider that necessarily a buddy cop film
as much as one, sure.
Yeah. But then 48 Hours came out a couple years, I think 4 years before this did. However, this had I guess this is the genre defining of what we now consider a buddy cop film to be. And Shane Black has went on to do other versions like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. He wrote this, and and the beauty of this work is that it has a lot of the cliches of buddy cop films, but they weren't cliches at the time. This defined a lot of those, and for the most part, it's actually played straight, which I like quite a bit. What would be Flanderized is the term. In later Lethal Weapon films, such as I'm Too Old for This Shit, was actually played as a legitimate grief in this one. And you're right, the character work, but what I think sets this apart is the fact that they have your work. You get to see them work through to figuring out how the plot unfolds, and the enemy strikes. They think Riggs is dead. And they come up with a plan, and any other film would have that be the climax. but there's a subversion on top of that when they get bested by the superior antagonist.
Mhm.
And I actually like that. And now, I granted, you would go on to see other films do this kind of thing. True Lies has a similar kind of ending to it. However, I think that it handles almost a subversion of even before it's subverting while codifying at the same time, which is a neat
Constructing
thing.
while it's literally constructing.
Yeah. So that's my argument for a 3, although I'm not 100% sold on that either.
Let me just hold on. Let me just jump in really quick. Ian, the film you were talking about was Stray Dog,
Yes.
Kurosawa film.
I keep thinking Straw Dogs, but I know that wasn't correct.
Right.
I was gonna say Strange Dates is what we're gonna do.
Yeah, that was came out in 49. I just looked it up too. So that came out in 49. So, long before this movie, but
Yeah.
I think this one kind of codified it a little bit more. So anyway, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm leaning towards a 3 because I think you even mentioned it yourself, Steve-O. So it clocks in a running time is under 2 hours, and it goes through its plot, I think, perfectly paced. It doesn't waste. If it wastes a moment or two here and there, it doesn't waste a lot of time. It gets you through, and yeah, character work we'll get to for sure. But I mean, I think for the very fact that it's recognized as a codifier slash, pillar of the buddy cop structure and template, etc., and it's still, for the most part, known and recognized. And it's a simple enough plot, right? They uncover a conspiracy involving ex-military, right? And Danny Glover's character Murtaugh knows them, has a connection to them, and then just unfolds from there, and they figure it out. And yeah, they're gonna outwit the villains, but oh no, the villains got one up on them, but then they win in the end, and boom, that's it. So it gets through itself perfectly fine. There's not a lot of lulls, not a lot of dull moments to it. It just clips itself along perfectly, and I think for half of what it is on surface, and half of a little bit of credit at least to what it did for this genre of film in general, I'm going to give it a 3.
I just have one last comment to build off of yours. One of the reasons Die Hard's beloved is because John McClane has to suffer through it to win. He's under overwhelming odds, and he gets punished in order for his victory. And that's actually one of the reasons that 80 action movies have that kind of beloved quality to them, is that you feel triumph. And in here, they certainly earn their victory against an antagonist which is better than them. And that's why I like it as well. Granted, perhaps I'm a glutton for seeing Mel Gibson get tortured, but
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
but I feel it's an earned victory.
That's a good point. I'm still sticking with 3.
Mhm.
Yeah. So hold on. I'm sorry, Chris, you haven't gone yet, right?
No.
ahead.
Actually, I'm probably going to land on a 2, because I think I'm going to move some more stuff over there, because Ian, I liked your argument that, the subversion was that they were ahead of the game, but I thought there just here and there, I felt like there's one of those things where I felt like there could have been, I don't know. I appreciate it a lot more now. I was really thinking I was not going to go into this being like, it's a film that I don't often think about, but I'm watching it and I hear you guys' arguments, but I think I'm probably, it's going to be a stronger 2, but I think I'm falling on the side of 2.
Yeah, I did it. Totally fair.
You guys got me for a 3. I'm going to bump it up.
That's a 3 for you, Scott. All right, it's on to me with themes. Now, yes, there's that. It's a general action movie theme of triumph against an enemy that that's superior to you. It's two, which is now a cliche, but two very different people having to work together and learn and drawing closer to each other, and the friendships that get built and the trust that gets built. And I actually think that one of the nice parts about this is I actually think that Mel Gibson plays depression very well, and to a certain extent PTSD, because he's a Vietnam vet, but more so his affected of his wife dying from a car crash. and the fact that you actually saw him slowly start seeing him. Like, I thought one of the best scenes in this is when he survives the shooting because he wore a bulletproof vest.
Mm.
Beginning of the film, he would not have
Never
worn that, but you slowly start seeing him find something to live for. While Murtaugh is, of course, older. He's feeling his age, but he has to, and he kind of understands because he loses his daughter. But what I wanted to talk about here is none of those. I think that it's actually, aside from Mel Gibson's occasional homophobic slurs, I actually thought this was a fairly progressive film. Uh, it's almost, aside from one line, a very almost a post-racial work. That it doesn't matter. Color is not brought up into it really. It's everyone respects everyone. Uh, I really appreciate that. They also had the sticker for ending the apartheid, which would be a bigger part in Lethal Weapon 2, but they have that appear in
The South Americans.
yeah, and the only racial thing is that the little kids saying, "I hear that my mother tells me that cops kill black people," or something like that.
He literally asked a black cop that
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, and he has to like assure him that he's not there to like kill him, basically, which is that really brought me like out of the not out of the movie, but like that brought me into the current moment for just a minute in this movie, which was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I did not expect that from Lethal Weapon, you know.
Well, the funny thing is, and I don't remember if it was in Lethal Weapon 3 or 4, but I don't think it was in 2. It may have been in 2. Murtaugh accidentally shoots one of his son's friends who had a toy gun. So in a lot of ways, unfortunately, some of the stuff that's in here, well, actually, no, the whole thing in the 80s was sometimes kids were getting shot because, coming out of the 50s, 60s, 70s, guns looked very realistic, which is why even on the Star Wars guns, they're like white and, you just can't get any like realistic looking guns, excuse me, for kids anymore. So I'm gonna give these films that much credit, that they did actually address these things, greater or lesser, and unfortunately at times they've become more relevant. So
I also had one last thing about the progressive thing is that where this could have easily been Russians or any kind of enemy, it's actually the U.S. government and the CIA, and bringing up kind of the shittiness of American policy during Vietnam. But it's great that we exist in a time where the CIA is no longer doing
That's not a
shady
problem
things.
anymore
Yeah,
at all.
it's not like during the Reagan era where
Hallelujah.
drugs and
Anyway, yes, I agree with actually a lot of that. There is this kind of feeling of this film specifically tried to be like a bridge between worlds that were perhaps not like bridging that well at the time or something, but like I do like that there's not a lot of discussion about it. It's just like, oh, we're two guys, we're gonna work together. Like Danny Glover's problem is that that Mel Gibson is a fucking lunatic, and that's like that's kind of where it ends. Like I kind of like their dynamic is great. They have great chemistry together. I guess that's not really a theme. We'll talk about that in a minute. But there also is for sure the they address the heroin issues that were happening in the 80s and things like that, and kind of go into that.
And it's a great thing the opioid epidemic's over as well.
Yeah, thank God we finished
Also
that off.
solve that too. So
Listen, it's first of all now it's a medical problem because white people are suffering, but not to get
no rich white people,
even though we already have. Yeah, well, whatever. I guess we're a little bit off track, or I'm a little bit off track here. But
what are you giving themes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. There is that kind of progressive lilt to this movie. There's also they talk about kind of the drug issues that America's having and at the time, and just kind of like this whole dealing with Gibson's, with Mel Gibson's character's issues, like mental health issues that he's dealing with of his wife and the depression that he's going through. And he's clearly suicidal, and kind of he starts to get over that, heal from that to a degree, not specifically because of Murtaugh, but because like of his family for the most part. Like he's invited into a community, like the community of his family there, and that's kind of where he starts to get back on his feet, and I really like that. So I think the themes are pretty strong in this movie, to be honest. And yeah, that's all I had for that.
Yeah, I mean, 100% agree. I think it's like both of those, like it's all the progressive-ish stuff that, again, barring the two lines that we'll get to that were unfortunately said, but everything else, right? Like it's just treated as is, and then on the other side, Steve, like you said, the PTSD, the grief that Riggs is dealing with, and then how he heals, like almost like Murtaugh's family becomes therapy for him and brings him back to like to having to not having a death wish anymore, essentially, and starting to heal and starting to come to grips with the loss of his wife and becoming a good cop / detective. So yeah, I think it's all strong on many fronts, and gonna give it a 1.
Actually, it was really funny because watching this film, this part of the reason I gave it a 2 was because the last scene, well, it would have probably been leaning into the side of being a little precious. I think it would have been better for them not to have killed Gary Busey, because the themes and the character work were so strong. That is what elevates this film. What?
Can we just admit that was such a strange scene?
We'll get to it in style, yeah.
Yeah, we could just no, but much like the reason I'm giving themes is, in the more we talk about themes, I'm definitely giving 1. It really kind of pulls more of the I'm like sitting here listening to you guys about the plot. I'm like, yeah, but why? And then I realized the more we talk about themes and we talk about character, the more I realized the flaws in the film kind of took me out of what was for me carrying the film.
Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. All right, Scott, and to you with antagonist.
So this one's like, I guess not iffy, but so as we discussed, like essentially it's a cartel made up of former like CIA / special forces, right? So again, it is nice that it isn't the Russians or isn't like some other like foreign cartel. Like it's just former Americans who are now, because of what they were involved with in the Vietnam War, like now are doing a drug trade in LA and wherever else. Yes.
Although to be fair, they did have the vaguely European
like,
mercenary group
there, but like they're like the big bad behind the scenes is a former older white gentleman American general who's turned corrupt and is dealing drugs. So like here's the thing, you just mentioned Gary Busey, like he's the dragon, and like I think he's pretty good, of course, at least for the way he's essentially Mel Gibson's Riggs's foil, right? He's like the other way he could have gone, essentially, right? So like that's all fine. I certainly feel as if the characters themselves, Danny Glover and Mel Gibson, like very quickly become antagonized as they unravel this conspiracy and figure out what's happening, and then start getting targeted because of what they know and what they're tracking down and so forth and figuring out. And even Murtaugh's daughter gets kidnapped and so forth because they're trying to get him information out of him or what he knows, and either kill him outright or silence him or blackmail him or whatever their plan is. So like it's all fine. I don't think he's like particularly menacing, that is, but he is a competent villain, like you said, because he sort of outwits them at the semi climactic scene, if you will, like in the desert when they're doing the deal there. So like I'm probably leaning towards like a fine 1. It might not be the strongest villain antagonist, but I think it makes sense, going back to the plot and even to the themes even a little bit, as we just talked out, that like it's serviceable, it works, and like there's nothing odd or wrong or like that it just falls apart. Not like the most prevalent and charismatic villains. They're good enough within the framework that I think I will give them a 1, unless you guys have something else to convince me or have a different take on it. So with that, go ahead.
So a quick thing, like, was it weird to anybody else that the like general himself was the guy that got Riggs, like with the like?
Not really. Like,
wouldn't that be like a henchman out there, like in the field? Like, is that guy really gonna go and like risk
He's a former
himself.
general. Like, no, his henchmen, like, that's the whole thing, Steve. It's like a smoke and mirrors thing. Like,
I
oh, the
guess.
henchmen are there, right? Like, they're
Just
not
seemed
expecting
weird.
him-
Like
they're
I don't know
expecting him to
why.
do it. Anyway.
Like this old ass man is gonna like imagine if they got into a fucking boxing boxing match like they have in the front lawn at the end of the
Break a
movie.
hip.
Yeah, you would beat the shit out of this guy.
Well, that's why his plan is to not get into that situation.
Like you just be like, hey, they're gonna be over there. Send somebody who is able of body and mind.
I was kind of angry that they caught themselves in a way.
Yeah.
If they hadn't got full throttle, but again, that's what villains do. I am going to bring up that scene though. I remember the first time I watched this film when I was young. I didn't like the fight choreography at the end of this movie, and I think it brings me out of the entire thing. And I was wondering where I was going to deduct points off of this for. I might have done that in the plot. However, I'm going to do that in antagonist. And also, if you compare this movie, you have to look at it in the level, in its tier. And this is now being compared to things like Die Hard and other 80s movies. And this perhaps has one of the weakest enemies. First of all, you don't remember General McAllister, is it, or whatever?
Sure.
It's just the general, I think. That's how
He's
he's
got a name now.
built.
Yeah.
They said his name like 3 times at some
You
point.
might remember Busey, but then the ending sucks to me. Like Hans Gruber is much better, but that's Die Hard. But I think even like to any of the Die Hards, really, aside from maybe the second one. But if I'm comparing the villains to the second Die Hard, that's a problem. So I am going to give it a 0 because this is now considered one of the great kind of action movies, and this has one of the weakest villains.
So let me jump in here. I'll say this. I would give this a 1 if it weren't for that last like literal boxing match in front of the entire LAPD on the front lawn on Murtaugh's front lawn. Like that shit was so fucking crazy to me. I didn't understand what was happening. Like I feel like even like at any point, I can't believe that anybody in a police department would allow this to happen on somebody's like front lawn, let alone and like
They did say Murtaugh was in charge, and he was like, "Stand down, let him have a fist fight."
Yeah, like Murtaugh's
First of all, it's the LAPD.
fucking let them go,
They
let them
shoot
hash it out.
first.
It's like, dude, they're not on like a fucking, they're not out back of the school. This is like a guy that's killed a bunch of people. He's like running the biggest heroin ring in the, like.
And by the way, did they set up those cops to die?
I guess
Like
like
his house, if you
it
notice.
just, I don't know that and I have to remove points from this movie for that scene somewhere, and I'm gonna do it in antagonist. So like I'll give it a 0 for antagonist, but
Same thing there. Yeah.
Mhm.
you know, like that shit is crazy. And also, what the fuck? Did they clear out Murtaugh's house just to drive a car through it? Is that what they did? Because
What were you saying
it
about
felt
the two
like
cops who
driving
were
the
there?
car through it was
For
pretty
essentially bait, I guess, like for Busey.
I feel like they could have come up with a better plan than that. The whole end of this movie was like, I feel like they wrote it in about 10 minutes. They were like, oh, we got to do this on the spot.
Off a punch with that, but you're taking off here, and I get it. Like I totally see that, and I have more to say about it. But I agree with you guys. It's very strange, specifically that sequence of events.
But other than that, I thought the antagonists were like fairly well set up in the beginning of the movie. Granted, the general is not very memorable. Busey's character is pretty memorable, but the way that he ends is like just a fucking joke, and like I don't know. So I agree. I'm gonna take off a point and give a 0 to antagonist here. And Chris, go ahead.
I was actually originally going to give this a 1 because I thought that it was not a memorable antagonist at all. I remembered Gary Busey, but I thought his name was Christie, and then I realized no, Christie's from an Alien film. No, it's Joshua
From New Jersey. He's the villain of New Jersey.
Yeah, no, but the thing was, I was like, oh, they did a really good job with the character development and the themes, and I'm like, you know what, this villain could have been any villain, and they could have still accomplished it. As a matter of fact, I think in a lot of ways, if they went to slightly smaller scale on it, and actually the villains actually would have been more effective. I think it would have been even more if the less is more. I don't know, but I actually, Ian, you talked me into it. I'm giving it a 0. And Steve-O, thank you. You helped as well. So yeah.
There too.
No. But
Yeah, Scott, you were here too.
but the ending was absolutely fucking ridiculous. It was another, as far as Beth goes, this is another excuse to have Mel Gibson shirtless, and now we can put water on him. I'm like, yeah,
because it's the 80s. Like,
because it's the 80s.
get it, but yeah, no, that's fine. So that's what we're doing.
Oh, what did you decide upon?
I'm gonna still stick with the one, but
fair
like
enough.
a softer one. But yeah, like I'm still gonna give it just enough credit, at least overall. But I agree that that's again that sequence of events is a little bizarre and out of place for where it sits in the rest of the film.
All right, Chris, protagonist.
I am going to say that there's a dual protagonist duty in this one.
No way.
Shocking.
Yeah, I know it's shocking. I'm going to take a leap. The fact that in a lot of buddy cop movies, very seldomly do you see them actually really influence one another. They're just, to the extent that they will do it in here. And to Shane Black's credit, Nice Guys, he pulls that off really well there. And even in Die Hard, where you have a buddy cop film where the buddy cops are on the radio for 99.9% of the film.
Sure.
And I think this one is very effective. I actually did believe their friendship in such a short time, in the fact that, like, okay, you know, he brings Riggs to his house, and I believe this is a real family, and you know, it just feels like, okay, they haven't formed that bond yet, but you see that Murtaugh wants to, because, like, hey, doesn't seem like he has a lot of other close people in his life. And here's a guy who doesn't have a family. It's like, hey, let me come over and show you the boat. He's, you know, one of my favorite scenes was that after dinner scene where his wife's like, thanks for taking out the garbage. He's like, honey, I'm entertaining our guest. And the Riggs is like, do you know anything about boats? And he's just like, yeah, what's there to know? That's the front, this is the back, it's on the water. You know, and like, what did we learn today? It's like, well, we learned that marijuana is illegal. And it's just, what I'm saying is, I really believe these two friendship, because I think they really, you know, they really did help each other grow, which is another reason why I like the fact that, like, the general died, but it was Murtaugh was responsible for the general's death insofar as his inaction, which is why I thought it would have been better if Riggs's action would have been to not kill Gary Busey and not to have Gary Busey die at the end. But other than that, I thought they really filled out the pieces of the crime. They both needed each other, but more importantly, they were both missing something from their lives, and their companionship filled it. So I'm going to give it a very strong one.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered it pretty broadly, like pretty well, Chris. And I mean, that's the crux of it, right? If it didn't work, if their relationship didn't work, then this movie would completely fall apart. And I think, as you were saying, like, that's maybe why, as it went on, like, as it became flanderized, in a sense, like, it becomes less believable, less removed, because they lean in too absurdly, or like too satirically, if you will. But this one, the first one, is much more grounded, and the characters make sense. They are fully rounded. They've got their flaws, they've got their issues, motivations, etc., and they eventually work together to become a really good partner team and figure everything out and take down, you know, the bad guy, if you will. So yeah, it lives, or like I said, the crux is that, and the crux is there and holds up, regardless of, like, what do you think of the actors themselves. Or Danny Glover's a great guy, Mel Gibson's kind of an asshole scumbag in real life, but
It bounces out to
so maybe that's why it does work. Like, I don't know. But either way, yeah, it's just their relationship and them as characters is the focal point, is like the heart and soul of this film, and it works very, very well.
So as I mentioned earlier, I was doing a look on buddy cop movies. They say that where buddy cop movies generally lean into comedy, this one leans into pathos, and I think that's very well said. I wish I had said it myself, but I forget who I'm quoting on this, but it was part of one of the articles, and I completely agree with their point of view. And I think that both arcs work really well. Mel Gibson learning to live for something. Danny Glover realizing he's not too old for this shit. And,
Not quite yet.
he still has some fight left in him. It's great. So, and also in that one scene you were talking about, Chris, the smile that Danny Glover gives at the end, I guess when he's a little bit drunk, is It was very believable to me that he started to like Riggs at that moment.
Yeah.
So
It's like he wanted to say something else and he didn't know what to say. He goes,
Mm.
"So you really liked my wife's cooking? Like, this is, I'm just gonna throw this out there as a filler." And he's like, "No."
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah, I think that's
Like,
the
but yeah,
moment
no,
that
I
they
really well
became
said,
like
Ian, or really well quoted, or paraphrased, I suppose. Um, when I think that in a movie like this, the way to make it good is not to make it a comedy. It is to make it a movie that has comedy in it
it has
because
some
of
humor to
the
it.
relationship between the two characters. That's what you need. Like, even if it's a comedy, like this is obviously an action movie, so it's not like really a comedy, but like if you're looking at like any good like buddy movie that is supposed to be a comedy, is you still get the good uh comedy based off of the relationship that you build between your characters,
Springs
and
out
not
from
the
that.
other way around. You can't
Organic.
build a good relationship based off of jokes. You can build good jokes based off of a good relationship. And like that's the way it works. And because this movie does that, they get away with some, like a lot of action movies in the 80s and 90s were really jokey as well. But like this movie, is one of the templates for that type of style. And like it does really well. And the people that tried to make, the people that are funny, the writers that are funny but not good at writing characters are always going to fail in writing this type of thing. The people that are good at writing characters can make good jokes even if they're not as funny as those other people. And I think that's where it comes from in this. I think it's really well done in this, and I love these two protagonists, so I'm gonna give it a 1.
absolutely. All right. Mostly keep talking about supporting characters.
Well, all right. You've got Murtaugh's family, I think, is really a really important supporting character in this. And like, you get not a ton of screen time with them, but they are, Murtaugh through his family in this movie. You understand him through his family way more than you understand, like in the first 10 minutes of the movie, way more than you understand him through him walking down the stairs and getting a bagel or whatever the hell he gets in like at the breakfast table, or bacon that he's eating, that he steals from like one of his kids, or like even one of his kids' friends, I think it is. And like those little moments, like you understand his whole household. You understand like all his values, what in his mind he's protecting as a cop. You understand all that, and then you understand, and because of that, you get the way that he interacts with Riggs, and you understand why Riggs is drawn to this. Like, I know I'm talking about the protagonists a lot in this supporting characters question, but like, I think that the supporting characters really define the main characters in this movie, which is super important. Like, I don't think there are a ton of like big or really arcs at all. Maybe his daughter a little bit has a little bit of an arc, but like there aren't really arcs. But these characters are super important to the main characters in this movie, and like in a way that I haven't really, if I've seen it in another movie anytime recently, I haven't really thought of it in this way. And it really got me thinking about the supporting characters in a different way than I usually do going into a movie in this, because you have them. There aren't too many other like super great like supporting characters in this movie, as far as I can think of. Maybe you guys will bring up a couple, but like that, like Murtaugh's family really defines a lot of this movie, despite the fact that they're on screen for like 10 minutes, like total or whatever. Like maybe his daughter a little bit more, but like it's pretty wild how important that part of his life is to the part of his life that's on screen for most of the film. So it's a really strong one for me in terms of that, I think.
Well, I just want, like, it's weird because like I said this to Ian when we were watching, like, yes, but to me, like it's almost as if we're on the opposite side, because Murtaugh's family is an extension of him. So yes, they sort of like define, like they sort of like inform his mindset and stuff. But like to me, like they're not, aside from his daughter. The crux case is going to be whether or not we think his daughter is elevated enough to be, because other than that, everyone else is sort of there, like the captain, whatever, like the people in the precinct, blah blah blah. They're all there, but it's either them. But to me, like they were like more part of him than they were characters unto themselves, even though they are important to inform all of that. So like that's where I like. Go ahead, Chris, because
I was going to say, because I want to build off of Steve-O's point, is that I disagree with you. This is more of a character study than an action film, because without the themes and the characters, this is a direct to VHS 80s action. It really is. But the reason Murtaugh's family is important, not just to Murtaugh and talks about who he is, Riggs lost his family. And now he's got a partner who actually has a family. And now these people have become important to him because he cannot allow Murtaugh to lose his family.
Sure.
Because, so like that is why I see that his family, that Murtaugh's family is important, is because they're the surrogate for what Mel Gibson lost. And thereby the reason he's suicidal is because he lost his family. He's having a hard time living without his wife, but without his wife. But enter Murtaugh's family, and now all of a sudden, he's got, by extension,
What he could have had.
Huh?
He's what he could have had, almost like that type.
Yeah,
of thing.
but the thing is, it's not just he goes. I think the only thing that kept him getting up and not killing himself was the job. Well, now he's bonded with this guy, and bonded with his family, and now all of a sudden, well, he can't. Riggs lost his family, but he can't allow Murtaugh to lose his family. So his concern for Murtaugh's family may not just be because, okay, he likes them well enough, but they're now a surrogate. They're a symbol of what he's lost, and he can't allow that to happen to somebody else.
Also, Riggs requires an externalization of something to live for. He himself admits that he's a weapon. He doesn't, as he needs to have something. Yes, thank you. He needs to have an extension where, one, it's his wife initially, or his job, or Rick's family, but he can't find the happiness of himself. But I like your point, Steve-O, a lot. I think all of you made very good points about this. I am going to put that the finding is that I think the daughter has enough elevation to be defined as her own character with her own agency, and I think she's.
We should give her a name since we haven't yet. Her name is Trish in this.
That's his wife.
Or that's his wife. I'm sorry,
Rihanna.
Rihanna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The daughter has has a lot of facets to her, which I like going forward. I think she's the most memorable of the supporting characters in this. So I'm going to give it a 1 for that.
Now, see, again, like it comes back to sort of trying to bring it full circle. Like in my mind, like Murtaugh's family is an extension of the thematic elements, and what you guys just said is all important. Yes, that means that it gives Riggs the connection and bringing him back to having something to externally, get up in the morning for, essentially. That isn't like that's more tangible than just the job in a sense. But I think the crux case was going to be whether or not we give Murtaugh's daughter Ryan credit, and I think at the end you did convince me. If it wasn't for her, I would have probably stuck my guns with a softer Shiro. But you're right, she does have more agency, more character to her, and she obviously has a crush on Riggs at the beginning. And
do you remember the old Game of Thrones meme with Tormund's giant? Find a man who looks at you the way he looks at Brienne.
Yeah, Brienne. Yeah.
Find a woman who looks at you the way
Brienne looks at Riggs. I will say this, so really quick. I want to say, Scott, I have nothing wrong with the way that you viewed the supporting characters, but you say that his family is an extension of him. To me, it's reversed. Murtaugh is an extension of his family. So I see him coming out of his family. Without them, he's nothing.
I think it's a credit to the film either way, because you can interpret it and I think it works either way. But
yeah,
I think his daughter is going to be the thing that pushes me over the edge to a solid 1 because of that, because she has more time, more agency, is more relevant to the plot even.
Yeah, sounds good.
Real one quick mention, because I agree with you guys on the daughter and everything. She's great. I want to give a nod to Tom Atkins, one of my favorite actors who can act, who at times almost does it. And he, he does, but I cannot remember his character's name, which does not bode well. But he was the banker. He was a friend of Murtaugh's.
His former war buddy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been in like a
Front
lot of
man.
Carpenter films, and yeah. So Tom Atkins is one of my favorite actors who can act.
Sure.
I thought you were going to talk about the drug dealer guy at the beginning who can't act either.
No,
So anyway, it's on the dialogue. That's one's all around
One,
for
yeah.
supporting it. I'm doing dialogue. I think it's very well done. I think that Mel Gibson is a tremendous performance, doing emotionally conflicted man. I wonder where he got all of that from. But I really like Shane Black's snarkiness for Riggs. Riggs deals with has a great sense of gallows humor, and there's a couple of his jokes fall flat, but other times and I feel that the performances have elevated the dialogue quite a lot in this. That I felt was very natural. I believe their friendship. I believe their concerns over each other, whether it is fear initially or actual concern of friends facing death. I think it was handled very well. Aside from occasionally Riggs makes homophobic comments,
2 out of place comments or
which
Might be Mel
stuck
Gibson.
out to me. But that might not be Shane Black. Yeah, it might be Mel Gibson.
that's a working theory, but sure.
Yeah, but overall, I think it was handled very well.
Yeah, so I'm giving it one, giving the caveat of Mel Gibson's whether or not he inserted himself, like, go fuck yourself for those lines. But for the most part, and I like what you said a lot earlier, Siva, where you can make good jokes out of a good relationship, but you can't go the other way. And I think that's what really, like, one of the major parts of the dialogue to me is that, because there's moments where you're supposed to chuckle and like they're like sort of ribbing each other, like the gallows humor definitely like that is for sure is there and also lands. So like I think that's the sort of groundwork that is built upon, and then you got like the normal detective stuff that they're doing, and even when they have like the intense confrontations with when they finally figure out or track down the general and Gary Busey and so forth, and have like the big scene in the desert and all that, like it all fucking works for the most part and is very well done. And yeah, the performances are, again, aside from that little those moments, like make it very engaging.
Even the exposition is handled well
Yeah.
for the most part.
Yeah. Shane Black really used to know how to write a script. And sorry, Shane Black. Don't
Well, he
write
did the nice guy.
Don't write the Predator again. Anyway, I think that this was really good, and you guys have both mentioned it, but there was a little bit of gay bashing in this script, and like I feel like it's weirdly like in so many scripts in the 80s and 90s, like out of nowhere for no reason. But what are you gonna do? Otherwise, again, it was a really well done script. I love the character development through the dialogue, like their the development of their relationship through the dialogue is great. And like I said, like we just spent a long time talking about supporting characters and like how important they were to this movie, and like they have a couple lines of dialogue, but all of them are really important to the characters, to Murtaugh and Riggs as they go through. So like definitely great, definitely a 1, and I'll leave it at that.
All dressed up and no one to blow. That line has
And I
stuck with
almost
me.
missed that.
I had one. I
I
wrote one down.
Since when I first saw that line, I went with my buddy Noah. We basically both left our families on Easter to go see this film, like back in 1987 when it was in the theater, and like we were like 2 of the only people in the theater. And when he said that line, we fucking both lost it, and it like echoed in this empty theater. But the dialogue's great, which is funny. Talking about the dialogue, talking about supporting characters. Anybody who's not Murtaugh's family or any of the main supporting characters has like no dialogue or no personality. I mean, the therapist, how many more times could she say I think he's on the edge? But I think, I think Shane Black's dialogue is really strongest when it's focused, and on this film it is. So I'm giving it a 1.
Sorry, Chris. You mentioned the therapist. I thought she had a quick line, like when she says to the captain or whatever, she was like, Riggs, I think, is like, you're at risk, and she's like, he goes, are you sure? She goes, no, you can't be sure, but that's what I think. He's like, well, then whatever. But like, I thought the fact that they even had her say, like, you can't 100% be sure, but this is my assessment.
Also, the captain going afterwards, well, like, oh, if he kills himself, then
I guess I'm wrong.
Yeah. But the callousness of, I actually really liked how a lot of people doubted the sincerity of his trauma, and I think that's very realistic too.
That is really, really
people. So I thought again, it's not just the enactment of depression and trauma, but it's people's reactions to it, which work really well, and also kind of the proto Leonard Kenny Canadian drug dealers are pretty good as well.
Hold on, if I may, what did one shepherd say to the other shepherd? Let's get the flock out of here. Sorry, I gotta get it in.
All right, now Steve-O, keep punning away with a style.
Well, isn't it me? I thought I requested.
Oh, yeah,
style.
Scott. Sorry.
Yeah. Sweet. Yes. So I will. So there's one big thing I'll leave for Steve-O and or Chris, but I think the shots like hold up really well. So it's an 80s action movie, as we've said and as clear. And I think those elements really still work. The thing in the desert with the helicopter, like the big shootout at the mansion when they confront Murtaugh's former war friend and they know he's in on it, and like they come to assassinate him essentially. And like the driving, like there's traces and the big shots when they're like swerving around at night. The gun chase between Mel Gibson, Riggs, and Gary Busey at the end when they got fucking assault rifles and they're chasing each other through the streets. And it's like the color palette again, like the lighting is excellent, just the landscapes, everything. It all holds up, and it's not like it's not cheesy in the way you might think. Like, oh, if you just mention to someone on the street, like, hey, Lethal Weapon, like, oh, it's all cheesy 80s. Nah, it's not, man. It's shot really, really fucking well, and it all works. And even the intimate moments, like when they're at dinner, Chris, like when they're at the family, when he's meeting the family and when he comes back home, etc. And like just a shot of Mel Gibson being depressed and like literally putting a gun in his mouth in his little camper, like that's an intense shot and blocked as well. So yeah, I think all of it in terms of the cinematography really holds up and really stands out and might be the strongest between this and the protagonist, like might be the best part of Lethal Weapon. And I'm giving it a super strong 1, and I will leave the rest to you, gents.
Yeah. I mean, I love of course, the neo-noir soundtrack to this. One of the first things you kind of notice when you get into the movie, the shots, as you mentioned, like I love the cinematography of it. There's one of the first shots of the movie is I forget what her name is, the guy's daughter jumping, like the sex worker jumping off of the whatever story it is, like the balcony, and it's this weird, like they like put the camera over the balcony shot of like seeing it's pretty obviously a dummy like falling onto a car, and then the car from the inside, you see it from the inside of the car like smushing in, which was like, I was like, that's kind of a cool like shot for when this, like in 1987, like that's pretty impressive. Just a smart way to shoot that, since you can't actually do great CGI in 1987 or any CGI. I guess they were just starting it,
stuff.
But like, you know, you've got that, and you have a lot of these really cool landscapes and like shots like out in the desert and the LA skyline, stuff like that. So like there's a lot of like really interesting stuff visually and hourly. So I dug this style of this a lot, and I'm gonna give it a 1.
What I appreciated quite a bit is the level of focus on realistic aspects of it, whether it's him when he is contemplating suicide. They show the safety go off. You see him checking the guns. When the general blows up at the end, it's not just a car exploding they actually give
Cut the shot of,
the
grenade that
grenades there. Yeah. So they go to that extra level of adding realism to scenes that where they didn't need to. They could have just had the car blow up, and most people would be like,
Sure.
"Yeah, that's what
it's
it
gonna
is."
blow
Okay,
up
yeah,
regardless, but like
but we're actually going to give it a reason to blow up. And I appreciate a lot of the small level of detail that they put into this. It felt very grounded in reality, and that's something to, I think, a lot of action movies should shoot for.
Shout out to Richard Donner, who I don't think we've mentioned yet, but he directed this.
yeah, we didn't, but yep, good call because he did.
He also directed The Omen and Superman the movie,
The good Superman 2 cut.
and apparently the good Superman 2 cut. Yeah. Yeah, since I will bring up Eric Clapton and Michael Kamen. Michael Kamen did do the at the end, the beginning of the, I don't know, around 2000, he did the S&M thing with Metallica. So he I guess has always been fairly experienced combining, pop rock with orchestral music, which I thought was pretty hip. I agree with you guys. The cinematography is great. The attention to detail was very, very good. Donner, when Donner's made some duds, but when Donner is running on, I'm losing the whole thing about pistons, thrusters, whatever.
On all cylinders, firing on all cylinders.
He's firing in all cylinders. Also, we didn't mention this before, but I am going to give props to Gary Busey. This is one of his. This is probably his best role.
Point Break.
Yeah.
My rebuttal to that is all.
Yeah, but I'm
hero of modern film.
But what I'm saying is, he, even as we were saying, I think with the villains, and I think this will go into style, was these guys could have been more mustache twirling. Like I said, this could have very well easily been a direct to VHS film. And I think I think paying attention to how much or how little presence and what kind of presence these people have on screen definitely says a lot to the style. So I'm going to say 1.
There's one other minor detail. I'll all dressed up, no place to blow. When Riggs and Murtaugh go to the hot dog or something, in the background, if you guys notice, there's a movie theater and it says now playing Lost Boys hit of the summer, hit of the year, or whatever. Did anyone notice that?
Nice. No, I didn't see that.
I did. I think it's awesome. Yeah. So anyway, just a final little cap off.
Hey, Chris, would you recommend Lethal Weapon?
It's funny because I forgot to watch this yesterday, so I watched it today. So it's kind of like, all right, gonna have to sit through this. I'm like, I don't ever really think of this movie. Every now and again, I'll be like, the all dressed up,
Sure,
no one to blow thing, because I thought that was an amazing.
That's what
But watching this film, I realized, like, no, this film is very informative, and not just for buddy cop films, but just the strengths of people like Shane Black and the strengths of people like Richard Donner. When Mel Gibson, apparently he's back to being able to act because he hit this, I guess before his ego kicked in. And obviously the family dynamic. I'm like, the second we were introduced to them, I'm like, all the family stuff started coming back to me. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? This film is one that's easy to fly under the radar, but once you get a little taste of it, you're like, it all comes back to you. I'm definitely going to recommend this movie.
Yeah, I also recommend this movie. I think it's a great one. You should definitely check it out. It's up there, close to the same level as Die Hard. I think I still like Die Hard a bit better, but Lethal Weapon is right up there with it, and which is saying a lot in terms of action movies. Real quick trivia, since I have to research everything as soon as we talk about it. You know who wrote Superman 2? Mario Puzo, writer of The Godfather. Anyway, go on.
Cool. Well, when we get to Superman 2, we'll talk about that. But no, I mean, of course, I'm recommending Lethal Weapon. I think I'm giving it a 10 at this point. And yeah, it holds up remarkably well. Like, I still remember liking it, but I said, like, it must have been a decade or more, 12 years since I maybe even seen parts of it, if not the original, all the way through. And I'd be curious to see if it holds up. And it fucking well does. And yeah, it's it's one of the lineage, the neo prototype, if you will, of buddy cop films. Right? It came up a year before Die Hard, and I agree, Steve. Die Hard might still be a little bit better than it. Like I like it better, but it's still fucking awesome, and it's one of the best, and still worth watching at this point. So for sure.
This is the second best Christmas action movie where someone falls off a LA building. However, I think that when I think a Lethal Weapon, I have a less. I think of the less quality films because of the influence of the Fumis that came after it. Even though I said Fumis there, the movies that came after it.
Films, movies.
Yes. And I was actually very pleasantly surprised. Enough that not only did I watch it yesterday, but when I came by Scott's earlier today, I watched it again.
I thought he hadn't watched it yet. So I was like, you ready to watch it? He's like, yep.
And I enjoyed both viewings of it. I mean, that's very rare for me to. So I have to give it a full recommendation. Anyway, on to the numbers.
So what does that leave us? The lethal scale.
Scott, give it a 10.
I was
mostly myself.
I was almost trying not
9.
to. But,
Chris 8. Give me a 9 over.
perfect. I wanted to give it a 9 myself. You guys convinced me on whatever you convinced me on secondary, but I think a 9 is what it does deserve.
9Zs.
And it certainly is.
Yeah.
Because I believe Die Hard was a 10. I said this was the second. So
it's perfect. What we said.
all right. Well, I'm Jonathan Manzer, and have a. I guess it's gonna be after the holidays. I hope you had a good holidays, and I hope your Christmas Busey wasn't too difficult to beat. I'm here with Scott
I
Thurler,
have to go have a weird fist fight on my lawn with a drug dealer right now. So good night and happy holidays.
Chris Morgan,
Happy New Year.
and Stephen Rossi.
And I will see you later. I got nothing clever. Good night.
Cheers.
And may your and may 2021 make it so that 2020 you look back on fondness and nostalgia.
Thanks for joining us here in the new year. See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.
Or Mott's?